Hi folks, it's Andy. Welcome to this week's Kendo Rant. Okay, here we are again for another week of fantastic questions. Thank you very much for sending them through. I am still experimenting, changing things around with all of the studio and stuff here. It's a new studio. I'm still only a few weeks into it. It's a different camera this week because my usual one's got a problem. I'm not sure how the lighting's working out, the sound's working out. But look, just bear with me. I'll be, in a few weeks' time, hopefully I'll have gotten the hang of it. Okay, so apologies in advance for any sort of recording issues there. Right, we've got all these brilliant questions. We're going to get to them in just a moment. But before we do, don't forget, all the YouTube stuff, like, share, subscribe, all that sort of thing. But most importantly, support the channel, support these videos. I've got more videos coming soon now. I've got a studio. I've got more that I can do. Still work going on though, all right? So if you hear like tools and stuff buzzing and stuff, there's stuff going on elsewhere. So apologies in advance, but we will be bringing more content to you and you can support the channel. The best way to do that is a win-win situation where you shop at KendoStar.com. That's my website, of course. It's my company. That's what keeps the cameras rolling. You get amazing, fantastic Kendo equipment because it is the best Kendo equipment shop in the galaxy, the known universe, and the multiverse. Everybody knows KendoStar is the place to be getting your Kendo gear. All right, so get to KendoStar.com. Everybody wins. Right, let's get to these questions. Okay, right, first one. Hi, Sensei. Since you mentioned being of the same height as Takanabe Susumu Sensei, do you mind sharing how tall you are exactly in centimeters? Yeah, I'm 187 centimeters tall. Honest. All right, I'm 173. Okay, 173. I'm only little. Right. Hi, I have a question if you don't mind. Sure, that's what I'm here for. I'm sorry if you've covered this elsewhere. What is the situation with men's stitch widths? I saw in a recent Reddit post people talking about stitching up to 12mm decades ago. I remember that common wisdom was that good machine stitch Bogu was 3mm or sometimes even 2mm. 5mm was more of a compromise for beginners and 8mm was just for kids sets and not for adults. What changed to make wide stitches preferable now? Along the same lines, can you think of any other outmoded thinking? Outmoded? Is that how you pronounce that? How do you pronounce that word? I've never seen that word before. That's my lack of English skills there. Outmoded? Is that right? Thinking of Bogu to be aware of. Thank you so much. Right, so I saw that Reddit post too. There's some interesting comments on it, let's put it that way. Look, the way it works, the stitching width of Bogu is really, really simple. All right, the more stitches you put in the Bogu, you're running a sewing machine over it. All right, it beats down on the futon as it stabs it through with a needle. The more times you do that, the more it compresses and compacts the futon. Added to that, the stitches are binding it to that thickness as well, right? So the more you put in, the thinner it is, okay? The more you put in, the thinner it is. That means what these millimeters are is the distance between the rows of the stitches. So the smaller that number is, it means that there's more rows, right? Because there's only a 3mm gap between the stitches or a 5mm gap between the stitches. So the smaller that number, the closer those rows are equals more stitches, all right? Now, what does that even mean? Well, it means that the more stitches there are, as I said, it makes it thinner. That makes it more durable because those stitches are a little bit more durable to abrasion than the natural cotton, the basic cotton, that's used to wrap the futon. And also when you have things like some of the stitches breaking and stuff, which they will inevitably do as it's being hit with the shinai, it doesn't cause as big of an issue as if it was a wider stitching, right? Doesn't happen so often though, let's be honest. Now, the other thing you get out of those thinner futon as well, because they've been bound so much with the stitches, it tends to be more rigid as well. So it's more moldable, right? So it's easier to create a nice shape with it. However, what you do is you make it thinner like this. And although it might feel quite hard at first, as you start to use it, it actually softens down a bit as well. So it doesn't provide the best protection. The best protection you get is from the wider stitch widths, all right, with the less stitching, because it leaves more of that futon padding in there. It leaves it nice and thick and cushioned, okay? So in the past, Bogu wasn't made with sewing machines. It was made by hand. It was stitched by hand, right? And of course, the more stitches you put in by hand drastically changes the cost to produce it, yeah? So more stitches equal the higher price. Higher price equals perception of higher quality, all right? Because it took more time to do that, you would then also find that the people that were making it, or the suppliers of those days, they would use the more expensive materials on the sets that they were applying the most effort to, even if it wasn't necessarily the most practical. Now, we're talking in sort of quite the early days of Kendo, not the early days of Kendo, but quite a long time ago, where, you know, the sort of attitude towards Bogu wasn't the same as it is now. And it wasn't necessarily thought of in the same way that it is, in that, you know, we don't have things like the internet where people can talk about the different experiences with Bogu and stuff like that. So the sort of attitude towards Bogu is very different as well, right? Then come along sewing machines. And the first machine stitched Bogu were pretty terrible, to be fair. But they carried on in that tradition, all right? And of course, it's still cheaper to make the Bogu with the wider stitches. So they kept the wider stitching for the cheaper sets that they could knock out quickly and just sell cheaply. And then they kept this idea of the tighter stitching because that had the impression of being the more expensive set on the, let's use the word loosely, higher quality sets when they first started doing this. Now, it wasn't as recent as you might think, but probably around maybe like 15 to 20 years ago, people started to realize that actually they could make the wider stitching, and there was a particular Bogu company, I'm not going to name them, but it's not one that I've ever been involved with, so before anyone starts jumping to conclusions, sorry, there's a frog in my throat there. There was a particular Bogu company that came out that was really into making these wider stitched ones, but with higher quality materials. So they sort of mashed the two ideas together. So you got this thicker protective stitching, but with the higher grade materials. And then they were super expensive. They're still super expensive. Then that sort of started to change the way some people started to think about how they consider the Bogu. Then maybe about 10 years ago, that became a lot more mainstream. And when I started getting into selling Bogu internationally with the other companies that I worked with, that was when it was really starting to kick off. So that's what that's about, okay? So essentially, right, that's how it came to where we're at. And the fact of the matter is where we're at now is, and the philosophy I have at KendoStar, of course, is it's not just about having the wide stitch or the narrow stitch. It's not just that simple. Obviously, the materials play a role as well. But also, what's super important is how those stitches are used, all right? So the application in the design of the Bogu itself. It's all right saying, oh, well, that's a 10mm set, or that's an 8mm set, that's a 6mm set, that's a 2mm set. You don't see 2mm sets anymore very often. You don't see them in Japan anywhere, definitely. Anyway, so for me, it's always been about making sure you use the right tools for the right job, as it were, so the right aspects of the Bogu design. So that's why you see with a lot of our Vanguard sets, you'll find the wider stitch width on the striking areas where you need that most cushioning, and then we'll use the tighter stitching on areas where it needs some more durability. So it's a good mix. You're getting the best of both worlds. The sort of most extreme example of that is probably our latest model, the Sentinel, where we've used 12mm. That's the widest we've ever gone with the Bogu stitch. Love it. It looks so awesome. I love it. And it's really, really thick, protective. And then it's like a double gunome on the mendale. So we've normally dropped to half the stitch width, which should be 6, but we dropped to half again. So it's 3mm on the mendale. Now that's the narrowest we ever go, to be honest. So it's like both of extremes in one set. And that's why I love it so much, actually. So you've got these really moldable very sort of, they're a little bit stiff, if I'm honest, because they are there to be molded and they're there to give you that durability on the Mendare, but you've got that really soft cushion. It's like wearing a cloud. It's wonderful on the actual strike zones. Probably only second to the Myrmidon in terms of protection, actually. And that's even funkier again. But anyway, we're going down a rabbit hole there. I've done videos all about it. Go and watch the webinar I did about the guide to Bogu, and I'll tell you, it tells you all about that sort of thing as well. In terms of other sort of outmoded Bogu thinking, I think the biggest one is probably the Mendare length. That's something that's changed a lot over the years. People used to prefer the longer ones, and now obviously shorter ones are a lot more preferred. They're a lot more practical. It got to a stage maybe about 10 years ago where they were getting super small or were ridiculously small, and the Zenken then stepped in maybe about 5 years ago and said, look, yeah, we can't do that. The Mendare have to be long enough to at least protect your shoulders. So we tend to make them so they're about shoulder width. I think that's about right as well. And then other things I'd say is like probably the design of the corda's changed a lot in the last sort of 15 years as well. They used to be really like this, which is really not great for the correct grip in Kendo. And now the more this sort of shape these days. So yeah, that's that. Quite an in-depth answer there. I hope I answered the actual question. I know there was a lot of rambling, but you did ask me on something a question on that I'm particularly passionate about. Okay. Hi, Andy. Recently, I've been thinking about buying a new Bogu set, and it would be really nice if I could buy one from KendoStar. Yeah, it'd be nice for me too. But shipping to Brazil may result in huge fees for us buyers. Do you have any tips or ways to help us get equipment from you? Thank you for the videos and help. Look, we already ship to Brazil. We send quite a lot of orders to Brazil, actually. It's difficult. The fact of the matter is, it is difficult. There's a lot of things there that are out of our control. Obviously, if you order a Bogu from us, it's free shipping. You don't have to pay for the shipping. So that's one thing that we already do. We can't really help you in terms of the customs charges. I know we do offer customs and duties paid on most orders, but Brazil is not one of the countries that's covered by that because we have no... We literally have no access to a shipping system that will allow us to pay the shipping duties for you. One doesn't exist, so it's not possible for us. And yeah, unfortunately, it's a bit crazy in terms of what sort of things get applied to it. So I'm already doing everything I can, if I'm honest. There's not a lot that I can do otherwise. I'd like to help you as much as I can. I'd like to help Kendo develop everywhere. But obviously I am limited by the sort of facilities that I've got access to. Next one. Hi, Andy. I seen a Kendo rant about a year or two ago about resizing a synthetic door, but you didn't tell about bamboo door. So if it's a matter of 2 to 3 centimeters, to make it smaller, can it be done, and can you tell us how? Okay, so yeah, I did a video about how to resize your door. It's super, super easy. And it is with a synthetic door, yeah, because they're really, really moldable. They're very, very durable. They're not going to break. Bamboo door, it becomes much more complicated. All right, I'm not going to lie, it's difficult. I am unsure if I want to go through the method of how to do it because I am very nervous that if you do it wrong, you will damage your door. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be done wrong. You can do it right and it can still damage the door. That's the problem. Essentially, all right, I'll talk you through it, but listen, this is 100% your own risk if you want to try it or not. I wouldn't recommend trying it at home. You can get wet towels or tenugri and put them on the inside of the door. On the inside, okay, and leave them there. Leave the door face down with the towels inside. Leave them there for about a day. Then come back a day later, put another... and then what you can do is you can use the himo to pull the door tight so it narrows by 1 centimeter maximum. All right? And then you can replace the wet towels, leave it there for another day or two. Maybe 2. Then you can tighten it a little bit more. And what you go in a couple of millimeters at a time. It's going to take you a couple of weeks, all right, to get it down by 2 centimeters. If you do this too fast or you do it wrong, you're going to crack the urushi on the door, all right? So that's the risk that you're running. If it's a kiji door, it's not as much of a problem because they don't have urushi lacquer on them. But if it's an urushi door with a gloss lacquer especially, if you do this too far, if you over tighten it, it will develop vertical cracks in the door, in the lacquer. All right, that's what happens, unfortunately. Okay, next one. Right, when recommending Kendo Taikai videos for a newer Kendoka, Mudansha, should we encourage them to watch high-level matches like the All Japan Championships? Or is it possible they could learn more by watching the matches people only a bit higher than they are, like first or second dan regional finals match? Possibly the lower level matches may be more approachable for new Kendoka and help them understand their next steps. As a new third dan, I feel I learn quite a bit from watching regional third and fourth dan matches, both in person and online, especially the finals and semi-final. I feel I can attempt to learn the next steps by watching the middle ranked people as opposed to forming a vision of my ultimate Kendo goals, which is where watching at the highest level Kendo is best. Right. So for new Kendoka like Mudansha, I definitely would say that they would gain more from watching the higher level tournaments. At their point, it's not a case of, it's not that they wouldn't gain anything, but they could also get the wrong idea. Unfortunately, like when you're at the beginning of your Kendo journey, there's not such a massive difference. It's hard for you to tell the difference between, let's say the second dan regional final and the All Japan Championships. It doesn't look that different to beginners. So what I would prefer is for them to watch the higher level stuff. And it's not for them to think, right, this is my next step, but I want them to form the mental image of what Kendo is supposed to look like. And they should get that from the best examples, which you won't get from the lower level, like regional matches, even though that's close to the level that they're at. Doesn't mean that they can't gain anything from it, but what you don't want is them to start trying to emulate the first dans, when really not the ultimate goal, but the goal for them is to try and work towards doing Kendo that looks like proper Kendo. So my personal preference would be for them to watch the higher level shiais, even in the beginning. Now, in your position where you're at third dan, you're in a bit of a different position because now you're down the road a little bit. So now you know a little bit more about what you're actually looking at. All right. So you're not sort of looking at it as almost as a layperson. You're looking at it with some context. In which case you need to watch both. All right. You need to watch both. You need to watch the highest level stuff. Figure out, again, you need to be absorbing that image, that mental blueprint of what your Kendo is supposed to be looking like. And also then looking at the matches from your peers, looking at, okay, well, this is how they are closer to that than I am. You've got the skills to do that now because you're a little bit more equipped than someone that's just starting out is. So that's the point I'd make there. All right. So yeah, that's my opinion on it anyway. That's where I would go with it. Okay, next one. Are there any YouTube channels for Kendo that you enjoy watching? I really like Kendo Mashigura. Sometimes they do videos fighting against another Kendo club. And it's very fun to watch. Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, there's loads I watch. I watch loads of Kendo YouTube. Kendo Mashigura is really good. It's an interesting one. I'm not sure like if everybody outside of Japan really understands the context of Kendo Mashigura, but Mr. Watanabe, that's the main person in Kendo Mashigura, he's a celebrity in Japan. Okay, so he's very, very famous in Japan. Pretty much everybody knows him from regular TV. I think he's a comedian. I don't know. It's a bit grey as to what these celebrities sort of raison d'etre is in Japan, to be fair. But in terms of that show, he's actually like a famous celebrity that it's really interesting. He loves Kendo. He just loves Kendo. And I think he did Kendo when he was younger. He took a break from it. He became this very famous television personality. And then he came back to Kendo, and I believe it was from a TV show that they had, and they still do it, where they get these celebrities and they pit them against actual successful competitors in various sports. All right. So they get different celebrities who did sports when they were younger, and they pit them against current players, and they give the current players a handicap to see if they could win. It's basically a showcase thing. And Kendo is often on it because there's several celebrities in Japan that have got a history in Kendo, with it being the most popular martial art. And I believe he came back to it through that. He basically did Kendo again. I think he was third dan at the time in that. And since then, he sort of got into training for it. And then he found a love of Kendo again. And he's been doing Kendo sort of regularly, I believe, ever since. And he just passed 6th dan. I think it was earlier this year or perhaps last year. So it's been great to see him sort of come back to Kendo and really work back through it. So that's really fantastic. And it's a really fun show. It's a really fun channel, especially if you can understand Japanese. I like that. I like, who else do I like? I like No Kendo, No Life. I think that's like the best YouTube name. There's a good channel. I post a lot of these links, obviously, on the KendoStar blog, because I post videos out that I found on YouTube and share them on the blog and share them around Facebook. And I usually link to the channel as well. I think there's one called Uncle Latte in Seoul, which is clearly a Korean YouTuber, South Korean YouTubers. There's like some Korean stuff written there, and lots of the stuff is in Korean, but they often take like the compilations from various high-level players. So that's a fun channel. Let's Kendo is a great channel, of course. Probably the biggest one in Japan. They cover a lot of events in Shiai. Obviously, the All Japan Kendo Federation's channel as well. Really, really great. So yeah, there's loads of great YouTube channels out there. I really like them. I'll probably miss some. Well, the Kendo show is the best one. And right, next one. Hello, Andy Sensei. I have a question regarding the concept of Kendo. The concept of Kendo is to discipline the human character through the application of the principles of the katana. And my question is, what does it mean with principles of the katana? What are the principles of the katana, or what we must understand with this? Thank you very much, and always have a great week. Thank you very much. So yeah. That's correct. The concept of Kendo is to discipline the human character through the application of the principles of the katana. So this is where it often gets misunderstood and interpreted, because it's the principles and not the techniques of the katana. That's why I often say that Kendo isn't directly sword fighting. It's not about how to win sword duels. That's not what Kendo is for. It's for self-improvement through the principles. Okay. Now, the principles is a very deep question. Now, to some extent, there's the physical principles, how we superficially use the sword, and some of that is obviously, a lot of that is preserved in Kendo itself. But it's more about like the principle of, for me, at least at the stage I'm at, the principle of how we apply the values of training, okay, or the benefits of training is probably better, through sort of diligent Kendo practice, and how that helps us grow as people. So let me put a simple example, all right? If there's I've never been in a real sword fight. I hope never to be. Okay? But you see in films and stuff, and I can imagine that this feeling that the two of you are, life and death is the consequence of your actions. And being able to overcome that, so that, what do you call it? Like that level of intensity or pressure, you are exposing yourself to that in the safety of not actually having to die. And being able to correctly conduct yourself under that pressure is an aspect of what this is talking about. All right. So it doesn't necessarily mean the principle of where we hold the sword or grip it or whatever. It's more about, this is for me, the principle of, that kind of intensity that exists in the Shinken Shobu. And then also, I think there is also, having said that, I mean, I'll be honest, this is something of me sort of riffing on it a bit as well, because I've not really sort of sat down and thought of it in this direct manner. But I think as well, some of the principles of the katana exist as well. Like, of course we care about some things like striking with the monouchi of the sword and using the correct hatsuji and using the correct tenoichi. Now, the tenoichi for the shinai isn't necessarily the same as it would be for a sword, but it's still a principle, right? Even if it's a little bit different for kendo. Things like kamae, zanshin, all the aspects of what we consider yuko datotsu are drawn either directly or abstractly from direct principles of actual swordsmanship. So I'd say that that's also part of the umbrella of principles of the katana. But I think the key is the word principles, because it's the sort of theory or the kind of the idea of it, really. But I really think there's something to that, that kind of intensity from the Shinken Shobu, the real life or death situation that Kendo presents us with, or allows us to experience if you're doing it properly throughout your training. And also at the same time, other aspects, things like where that can be thrown away, and you have to, abandon your self-awareness, not quite self-awareness, but almost abandon your, concept of self in order to diligently train. It's a deep hole to get into, but this is for me where it's at, I think, to be honest. It's a sort of combination of those things. It doesn't mean that the shinai equals a sword. The Zenken then literally said that it doesn't. It represents a sword. It should be treated with the same respect as the sword. But the shinai doesn't replace the sword. Literally says that. Okay. Right, next one. What are the differences between himo quality? Since I've received himo with a W mark on them as premium, but with my new kaisei set, thank you for that, the door looks great. I got some himo with a golden mark on them. They seem sturdier, but also shorter than usual, especially the door himo. Doubt they're shorter, to be honest. All of ours are made to the same length. But anyway, the difference in the himo quality is essentially you've got a few different ranks. You've got your basic ones, you sort of your Billy basics, dead standard ones. They're synthetically dyed. They're fine for your everyday use. But if you want something a bit nicer, then you have to go into the sort of Aizome grade ones. All right, so they're dyed with the proper Aizome, same as the Bogu. They're going to match the color a little bit better. They'll fade a little bit better. There's different grades of those as well. All right, and they tend to be Ume is like, its name is like a Japanese grading system. And essentially it's like Ume is the lowest one, Take is the middle one, and Matsu is the best one. And it's about how many threads are used in them. So what you tend to find is the Ume ones are almost exactly the same as the basic ones. They just dyed. with the proper die. The take ones they use the 3 more threads, so they're a little bit thicker, and then the matsu ones they're thicker again. And then the ones with the W, they actually use double the amount of threads, so they're often really quite thick. In terms of the difference, now there's a handful of suppliers that make these, and the labels all look really, really similar. And this is what makes it confusing, and they're not all available at the same time. So what you tend to find is suppliers, including KendoStar, that we're all the same, I think, in the same boat pretty much, in that we tend to go with what's available in terms of what we don't offer all the different grades, because I think it's too much to be bothered with. So what I like to tend to get is I like to try and get the standard matsu. All right, I'd like to try and get the standard matsu, which is the best quality, but not the double weaved ones. The problem I have with the double weaved ones is they're so thick that for me, they don't hold the knot quite as well, and especially if you're a bit newer, it's not as easy to tie them in a tight knot. So I like the ones that are slightly thinner. They're still brilliant quality, and they still last a long, long time. So we use them as our sort of Aizome ones, unless they're not available, in which case you might end up with the double ones. But we always go up, we don't go down. All right, you won't get the take ones or the ume ones if we aren't able to get our usual ones. Yeah, we'll go up rather than down. So yeah, it's a really small difference. It's not something most people would ever even notice or care about, but they're your main sort of differences there. Okay, I think that answers that. I hope it does. Next one, another question. Your series of Tenuguri with the Demon Slayer patterns is great. Any plans on releasing additional patterns in the future? No, because we don't, believe it or not, we don't manufacture those. We import them, and we resell those because we haven't designed them. They're based on the designs of Demon Slayer. We've got a couple. We've got the Dento Gara, which are based on the sort of designs of the clothing of the characters from Demon Slayer, or Kimetsu no Yaiba as it's known in Japanese. And then you have the ones with the actual characters on. We don't actually design those. We import them and package them ourselves. So I don't imagine there being other designs either, because they're based on the characters from the show. So at the moment, no. Okay, last one, here we are. Hello, Sensei. Thank you for your advice over the last weekend during the seminar. No problem. I saw you were on the grading panel for 4th Dan candidates, and I was wondering if you could help. As a member of the grading panel, what are the telltale signs of machiken, where someone, instead of actively applying pressure to break the partner, stands passively and waiting? Whilst we may be thinking we're applying Seme to the grading panel, we might in fact look like we're waiting for something to happen, which is frowned upon. Many thanks. Okay, so it's a good question. I think it's mainly the misunderstanding of what Seme is, right? I think there's such a massive misunderstanding of this term Seme that, loads of people out there think that it's some kind of like Jedi mind trick or something like that, or some kind of magic or something. And like, you sort of stand there like doing nothing, like this. Nothing's happening, and you're like, I'm doing Seme. It's like, you're not, though, because Seme involves the other person, not you. Seme is how you affect the other person, how your actions affect their actions. That's what Seme is, all right? It's about making them feel like you're a credible threat to them and that you're likely to make a strike on them if they don't react to you. That's what Seme is. And if you stand there doing nothing, doesn't matter how much you're posing, you're not doing that, all right? It's really obvious to the grading panel, all right? You don't look like you're actively trying to make a strike, then you're doing machiken. And machiken is from the Japanese word matsu, which means to wait, and ken is obviously sword, so it means you're waiting. Seme is not standing still, all right? It's not standing still. That's the key, I think. You have to be trying to, and especially at fourth dan, you need to be showing that you're another sensei at the seminar during one of the talks made a really good way of a good point. I think the way he phrased it was brilliant. He said, you're hunting. Okay, you're the hunter hunting for your prey. And that's exactly what you're doing whilst you're interacting with your opponent. You're not stood there waiting for them to come to you. You're actively trying to take the initiative and provoke a reaction so that you can make a valid strike. Yeah, that's what you should be doing for Seme. You shouldn't be, oh, I'm doing Seme. It's like, no, you're not. You stood there pretending. All right. So that's what it is. You have to use your feet. You have to use your shinai. You have to use your body. All right. To apply. It's not apply, but give the opponent the impression that you're going to do something that they're going to have to react to. Okay. That's what Seme is. Okay. That's it. We made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Like I say, apologies for like all the different things that have changed, the camera, the sound. I hope it's all okay. The lighting, I see the lighting's dodgy. I'm sort of dark here, and then I've got a window here that's made me all bright. So I don't know. We'll see if I can fix it in post. We'll see. Thanks for joining me today. See you next week. Bye-bye.